Hello there. Thanks for showing up. This is pre-recorded, just so you know. I couldn't take the time to do a live stream this Friday. Lots going on here. So hopefully you don't mind pre-recorded here. I'm hoping you'll learn something from this. And there's enough interesting information to watch. You can always zip through this faster if you want to see the end result sooner. Today what I'm going to do is just take an old painting, in fact a study that I did for the live stream that I did last time, or the actually pre-recording that I did last time with the old Cafe Sparrow. And it's a whole different color feel, and I kind of like the study. Well, I can show you what that looks like. I kind of like the study. It's okay. It was, I didn't take it to completion. I was just playing around with some colors. But the colors that I have here I like, and I want to use in this image that I want to paint today, which is actually a landscape of sorts. Something that I borrowed from the internet from another artist, and I'll mention his name when I post this online. This is a fun challenge. I like to paint over older paintings because I've got some color underneath, and I'm interested in the composition. I want to keep this very loose. And again, I'm going to keep it pretty much towards the greens. I'll have some greens and reds, and I'm going to actually put out a palette in front of you so you know what I'm working with. Hopefully I have all my paints in hand here. So let's just do that. I'm going to scoot out of here. Oh, there we go. I'm just going to scoot out of here. I'm going to grab some paints and let's get this started. So the first thing that I'm going to put out here is basically a titanium and zinc white mixture. I'm just going to throw that in here, and that's my lighter color. I'm going to take it's a cad yellow light. You can use cadmium lemon if you want to, or lemon yellow. These are Old Holland paints, or Winsor Newton for the most part. Actually, I correct myself. This is a cadmium lemon. This is a Winsor Newton cadmium lemon. And I'm going to put out a green here, which is Viridian Green Deep. And this is an Old Holland Viridian Green Deep, which is quite a nice color. That gets me to a green in a hurry. Viridian's one of those colors that you can kind of warm or cool depending on what you want to do with it, depending on the other colors that you put into it. If I want to cool it down, I'm going to use a yellow ochre, because that's a cooler yellow. Even though it's an earth tone, it's a cooler yellow than, say, a cadmium yellow. So I'm going to put that yellow in here. And this is actually a cheaper paint. This is what they call Norma. I'll show you what that looks like. This is Norma here. And I guess I got this as Schminke paint, which is still a good paint. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not as expensive as Old Holland. I want to put out a couple of complementary colors. So I'm going to grab some cadmium red, which of course is the complement to the green. And I'm going to put a little bit of that here. And I'm also going to put out some cadmium orange, which again, it's a complement as well, but it's sort of away from a direct complement, because it's orange. It has red and yellow in it. So it's kind of like, what's a secondary color? That's what it is. But it is a cadmium orange. So that's a nice pure Old Holland cadmium orange. And I think I want to put out probably a little bit of transparent oxide red, which again is Old Holland. It's my transparent oxide red. So it gives me a little darker color, although I don't want to get into too many darks on this. If I can keep it lighter, I'd like to. Let's see if that actually works out. And I think I need to take a warmer yellow. This is Cadmium Yellow Deep, which again is an Old Holland. So you notice I've got my yellows lined up here. I've got my red orange over here, and I've got my green. And if I want to cool my green down a little bit, I could use a bit of cobalt blue. If I want to warm my green up a little bit, I'm going to use manganese blue. So I'm going to actually take this manganese and I'm going to put that beside the Viridian that I have here, just in case I want to warm it up a bit. So that's probably enough color to get something going. The good thing about working this way is that you can actually see what I'm mixing here. I'm hoping this really works out, because this is the first time I'm trying something with a program called Double Take. So that means that I can actually come and go here pretty easily, and I can move this around so that you can see when I'm mixing. And of course I'm doing this on my iPhone, which moves around a bit, so forgive me for that. First thing I want to do is just get a great big brush and start to block in some shapes. Well, the last thing that I didn't mention is liquin. So I'm going to use some liquin, but I'm going to keep that on the palette that's beside me on the table because it's a little runnier. This makes it dry faster, but it's also something that you can use instead of, say, linseed as a medium. And again, it makes things dry faster, so that's kind of good. This is quite dry right here now. It's a couple of weeks old. So I'm going to mix up my first colors here. Let's just get rid of me right now. And the first colors I want are something towards, I guess, a mid-range green. So when I say mid-range, a mid-value, you can see this is fairly dark against this gray right here. I'm going to lighten it. Now, if I add white into that, it cools the color. That might be okay because I'm going to go into some of the dark areas first. You don't have to paint from dark to light. You can paint from light to dark, dark to light, or from the middle values out. Any way is okay as long as it works for you. You can see by putting some white into that, I've made that almost the same value as the gray of my palette. So I would like, if I can, to keep this sort of impressionistic. I'd like to keep the values in the lighter range, not as dark as what I see here. Because my light is warm, my shadows are going to be cooler. So adding white to that Viridian doesn't hurt at all. But I do want to warm it up a little bit. So I'm going to actually bring in some alizarin, I'm going to bring in some transparent oxide red. And I want to bring that transparent oxide red in at roughly the same value. When I squint at that, it's pretty close. I don't need very much of that. And the reason why I want to bring this in is because it is a red, and that will help neutralize this green so that it's not quite so intense. So I'm just going to move that into here. It's still green. I haven't lost the identity of the green, but it's brought it down in intensity. It helps to neutralize it. It grays it a little. So that's kind of my thinking as I'm mixing here. And you don't have to mix things up completely or thoroughly. Really depends on your style. I don't mind having some loose areas. So I'm just gonna, right now, gonna take a tiny bit of the liquid, add that in, and just start to place some shapes in here. And again, these are gonna be sort of my darker areas, believe it or not. Maybe some of these areas here are gonna peek through. I don't know, we'll see. I might let some of those little darks peek through. Depends. I like the colors that are underneath, like I said before, but I just want to get something going here I can bring a little bit more of the green in, a little bit more of the transparent oxide red in. If I need something a little darker, I'm just going to quickly draw out what I see in front of me, just getting some greens down. And I don't want to get too fussy with a lot of detail. I just want to get some color down. That's what I want to do. Get a sense of where my drawing might go. I'm not painting very thick here. That leaves me room for surprises and leaves me space to put thicker paint in later. And I really like thick paint, but not just for thick paint's sake. It's just that if you have paint down there, you can move it around later. If you don't have enough paint to move around later, then you end up sort of, going into things over and over again to try and make it stronger. And of course, we get tighter as we get more and more into the subject and more into the details of the subject. So none of this is going to make any sense right now. It's kind of a big mess. You saw what I started with, and maybe I should just post the original image that I'm working from when I post this online. Okay, I want to take a little lighter color. I happen to have a color down here. This is a Michael Harding lemon yellow. And I think I put a bit of ochre into that. This is left over from a painting I was working on before. It's a nice color. And I'm just going to drop a little bit of that in a couple of spots because I just want to get a sense of where my lights are. And I'm just putting this in very loosely, as you can see. I just want to get a feeling for where the big colors are going. Right now, there's a focal area right here, which hopefully will become obvious as I move forward with this. And just grabbing a bit of that green. Again, not too concerned about trying to be super accurate at this stage. Leave myself some room for surprise. Just jamming things in with a brush. I also like to work with a palette knife at this stage. I'm going to grab a little bit of a darker. I wasn't going to go too dark with this, so I want to be careful that I don't get too dark. Bring a little more of that green, but maybe that's about as dark as I want to go anywhere. And of course, to make something look darker, one of the ways to do that is to put something lighter beside it. So that's an option that I have here. All right, cleaning my brush out. It's okay to have a little bit of dirty color here and there, but you want to control that dirty color, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to go into this area down here. I want to get more of these greens going. Yeah, I'm getting a little darker than I wanted to. So I can always lighten that. I can come in with a bit of white, which again cools it, lightens it, takes that into a different kind of color feel. And right now, what I'm doing is pretty much working with a brush just to get things down. So I have a sense of where my composition is. It's very loose, very rough. I don't need to kill this thing right now. I don't need to try and make every brush stroke count. And I know some people work that way. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I like to work that way. And just try and be really accurate from the start. But this is a way that leaves me open for possibilities and surprises. And maybe the surprise is that this thing actually works in the end. That would be a nice surprise. We'll find out. Okay. So this is really a rough-in at this stage, of course. And again, you have no idea what this is. I need to get a blue going. And I'm going to use the manganese blue. with the white, because I want to put some sky in here. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah, that works. I don't need very much of this to get a rich sky color happening here. I could sneak up on some of these colors if I wanted to, and kind of work with very little color and then add more into it. But I want to try and get some vibrant color going. I can always knock it down, mute it a little bit. I'm going into my liquid here just to get a little more viscosity. There we go. And let's see what happens when I put this in here. And again, at this stage, really rough, doesn't have to be super fancy. It's just getting a sense. I'm squinting at what I'm looking at this stage to try and see where the big shapes are, the things that I need to be thinking about. Those big shapes first. We look at big shapes first. So that's how it is. And again, this isn't too thick. It's thick enough. I can move that around later if I need to. But it's just generally, loose, getting a feeling going. I'm going to go into this blue with a little more white. As things go into the distance, they cool a little. So I can go into this white a little more and just throw a little bit of a lighter color here as things go into the distance. I want to try and keep my drawing accurate to a point, but I'm not going crazy right now. I really just want to get the mood of this painting going. All right. I think I'll take that out to the edge there. At this stage too, what's kind of fun is just to take a palette knife. Now, this is not a very big painting. This is only 12 by 12 inches. And I want to just scrape through what I see here just to keep this paint fresh and broken. I want to keep my color broken. I don't want too many important edges happening here. If I'm going to draw into this, I want to know where I'm going. I've got a darker color underneath that will show through, or I can go into this with a smaller brush with lighter color on top. It's really up to me. Already you're probably getting a sense, a feel of what this scene might be about. All right. Just gonna drop some more paint in here. These things can go very quickly, by the way, when you work this way, because it really is an impression. It's a mood of what's going on. I'm just trying to recreate a sense of the scene that I see, again, without being too retentive, if I can say that. I want to keep this a little looser up top. Towards the edge, I just put a bunch of medium into my paint here. Up towards the outside edges, you keep things a lot looser. I want to go into these greens down here towards the bottom. This is foreground, and this is going to be a little bit warmer towards the foreground. Get a sense of light coming through. All right. I want to connect these shapes here. It's not that connected within my original reference, but I think this is a place where I can afford to just kind of pull things together a little bit. So to do that, well, I'm going to grab a little bit of that manganese. I'm going to grab the green. I'm going to grab a little bit of that transparent oxide red. Oh, heck, I'll put a little bit of orange in there too. So it's a little more neutral, a little darker. And let's just see. I'm just going to draw a few little shapes in here. And again, really trying to keep it down to bare bones. I don't need to get a whole lot of detail going. It's not helpful. Not at this stage. And actually, even towards the finishing stages, if I really want to keep this fresh, then I just want to keep this rhythm going. I want to keep this idea, these patterns, loose and fresh. I'm going to grab a little more energetic color here and bring that into this area here. These areas here are kind of like in shadow down in here. So, you know, you can have lots of color in shadow. Case in point, I'll just grab a little bit of this manganese. It's warm, light, cool shadow. This is kind of a warmer blue, but that can work quite nicely in shadow areas. And again, I want to pull these areas together. So I'm going to go into my greens. This is getting quite dark here, so I have to be really careful I don't get too dark. But I do want to pull these together. So let's see how this goes. Again, without any preconceptions or preconceived ideas as to how this is going to go, I really don't know. This is the fun part, really, because when you don't know where it's going to go, there's still some excitement, some energy in it. And, you know, it's not all worked out ahead of time. It's allowing you to respond to the subject that's in front of you and make it your own. So this is my own scene now. I'm trying to design in a sense, but not to the point where I'm a slave to my reference. So my old boss used to say, don't be a slave to your reference. And you know, it makes a lot of sense. Why are we painting things that we don't really need to paint because they're really not that important to the whole message? So try and keep the message simple, keep your idea in mind, perhaps, but not stuck to your idea either. It's okay to have some ideas and figure out where you want these things to go, but be open to the possibilities that happen. I want to lighten some of the colors that I see in here. Now, one thing I don't have out here, I kind of want to get into some more violet sorts of colors for fun. So I'm going to grab a little bit of magenta and just throw a bit of that out here to create some more interest in the colors and the shadow areas particularly. And at this stage, also I'm thinking I'm going to put this brush away for a moment and start to do a few more things with a palette knife, which will give this a little more punch, a little more energy. Okay. All right, now I wanted to get some more violets going. So what happens if I take these two colors, that's the manganese and violet, put those together, just add a little bit of white to that, touch of green, and just start to kick some of that stuff in here. Get some of that color there, and if I've got a little there, maybe I can have a bit of that over here too. Why not? Again, playing with the color, just letting it talk to me. Where does this work to balance what's on the other side? I'm not very concerned about drawing at this stage. Really not. I'm just more concerned about getting some big shapes working, getting color down, and trying to keep it moving and pleasant. All right. Okay, so now it's at a stage where I really, this is when I would like typically sort of get back, step back, look at it, look at the big shapes, try and figure out what's working, what's not. It's funny when I step back right away, I see certain areas that they need a little bit of, they're getting too much attention. For example, this triangular shape right here, it's getting too much attention. It's not important to the scene. I'm going to take that out of there. That was just some light that was hitting the top of a stone wall here. I'm just going to move some things around again to try and simplify as much as I can. And I want to figure out where my rhythm is in this. What caught my eye in this image that made me want to paint this. Okay, I'll get rid of me again. I think, yeah, okay, there we go. All right, now I want to get a little more definition in a couple of areas so that we have, again, this is kind of a focal area here. And also just above that. So this is kind of the center of interest, these zones right here. Sharp edges. Sharp edges will give you a focal area. So I'm just going to drop that in. And maybe I'll just pop that in this way. And I'm going to take a little bit of the dark that I have here, this darker color, and just define a couple of spots here. You don't need to do much of this to start to bring the eye to where you want people to look. Again, these colors that I'm putting in here, I'm trying to keep them colorful, if that makes any sense. It's okay to have lots of color in your shadow areas. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as the values are working. So you want to make sure your values are working. That's key. When I say values, how light or dark something is, that's important. The nice thing about working with the palette knife is that it doesn't give me the chance to get too fussy with my drawing. And, it's great to draw, but, when you're painting, it's really a different feel. It's more about the blocky shapes that you see, these interesting abstract elements that keep things together, that pull your eye into something. The areas of interest that really don't have a lot of information in them to begin with. So I do like when that happens. It doesn't always happen the way I want it to, unfortunately, but then you just go back and put more in if you think you need to, or take things out. Sometimes it's taking areas away. That gives you more, that leaves information that's important, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of like working in reverse to the way you would think you would. So instead of putting more in to explain it, take stuff out and leave what is important. And that helps, because then the viewer is less confused. There's not so much stuff to look at. Simplification, that's a really important part of painting, I think. And drawing too. If I was looking at this thing entirely as sort of just value, I would be looking at large areas that are, basically that hold everything together in the shadows. So the things that are in the shadows are what help keep the things in the life that are in the light, sorry, in a sensible place. So as soon as I start to put, some darker areas in here, get rid of some of this, all that noise that's happening there, try and keep it simple, my eye's drawn through this more. And if I keep my light areas really clean as well, in, again, simple shapes, I'm going to try and do that. Get a little more dynamic color going here. That brings my eye to this area as well. Just pop a little something in here up against this focal area. And I'm really making this my own. This is not what I'm seeing entirely in the scene that I have in front of me. I'm making this my own. Okay. I'm going to go into that blue again, even lighter, in a couple of spots here. And there is an area of trees back in here that they're less important, they're more gray. So I'm going to mix all my colors together here. And let's just see what happens. Maybe I'll bring a little bit of violet into that. I'm just going to gray that down, that whole area, because there's lots of tree activity happening there. But it's just a big zone. So I'm going to go into this here. It's lighter in value than this, darker in value than what's going on up there in the background. And you can see how when I work with a palette knife, it doesn't give me a chance to get too fussy with my drawing. Won't take much now to pull this together, I don't think. I want to get a little more of that nice rich blue happening down in these areas that got a little warm. Again, warm, light, cool shadow. Okay. All right, this is getting kind of the feel that I'm looking for. Don't mind the composition. It's going to take very little at this stage to kind of pull things together. I'd like to try something that I actually watched Patrick Lee do, and if you don't know his work, you should look him up. He's a great artist, and he showed something in a video he just did recently with Winslow Arts. So let me just grab something here. What I'm doing is I'm grabbing a piece of paper. I really want to try this because I've never done this before. So you know what? Again, leave yourself open to experiment. What I want to do is just take a piece of paper. This is drawing paper. And I'm going to put it over top of this and just press into it. You can see that's all I'm doing. Pressing into it. And you'll see what happens. Like that comes off and you get all that smush, right? And then you just take that and drop it over top of the painting in another spot and push that down, and that leaves you with all kinds of interesting textures underneath. I'm going to do the same again, just drop it over here. And this is a way of creating some looseness, some impression, and maybe I can use that. You can see what this looks like now. That could turn into a scene in itself. It's kind of neat. I can see a whole scene coming out of All right. I got all these funny little things that happen all over the place. Some places it works, some places it doesn't. Some places it doesn't. So there's detail where there's no detail. So I can go into this with a palette knife and just start to pull some things together. Let some of that random color that happened do its magic. I have to wonder sometimes if the Impressionists didn't do some of these things. And again, if you look at Patrick's work, you'll find it's quite impressionistic, quite loose, very fresh, very freeing when you see the way he paints. It's very freeing. So I want to thank Patrick for showing this technique in a session. I was very generous to share these things. There's no one trick that makes an artist. It's not about tricks. It's about trying to get a sense of a visual feeling that you get from a painting. It's not about, I know how to draw this so well or paint this so well. And, some people are very skilled. They can replicate things very well. But there's something about painting that goes deeper than just being able to put something down that looks exactly like what's in front of you. There's something more than that. There's that feeling that you get. I'm just using some leftover color that I had on my palette to the side here, which you can't see. I'll just show you. This is what my old palette looked like that I was working with. So sometimes I'll just grab a color that makes sense. And as I did that, all my liquid went to the ground. So there we go. I'll have to deal with that later. There's some interesting colors in this, however, and I can drop some of those colors in just to pick up something that's different than the background. With all of those greens going on, I can afford to go in with sort of a complement, a neutral complement, if you will, and just pull up a little bit of information that way, and you get this vibration that's set up with the complement colors, and it's very pleasant because it just takes it into the way we see chromatically. Again, it doesn't have to be super detailed. It's just an indication and a feeling. I want to be careful that I keep my brush strokes or my palette work random enough that I don't get into doing all the same actions all over the place. That's not how nature presents itself. Let's put it that way. I can get some pure color going in at this stage. I'm going to take this into the foreground and bring a little bit more color. As it goes back, it becomes a little more neutral and a little cooler as well. So I can take some of that color back there. When you've painted outdoors a lot, you start to find out what color does. And if you haven't done any plein air painting, I can't recommend it enough. It's really important to get outside and see what color really does. And really observe, really look at it. Because that's when you take this sort of subconscious knowledge back to the studio with you. And you get to invent your own color. And that's a lot of fun. Nature presents us with some, consistent concepts, but we can take those and make those concepts our own. And it's a beautiful, creative way of making your work more interesting. All right. So we're like 40 minutes into this, basically. And I'm getting the feeling that I want. I'm okay with it so far. And it won't be much longer before I just put in a couple of details that I think will finish this as far as I need to go. All right. pick up a little bit of that warm color that I had here. If it happens here, chances are it's going to happen in a couple of other places as well. So, you know, look for a little bit of balance with your color. You know, sometimes I look for triangles in color. If I've got an area here and an area there, I might look to pick it up somewhere else. And maybe it's not an obvious triangle, but it's just a hint of a color that helps pull your eye around a painting. And if it's too strong, you know, you just kick it back. That's all. Just, you know, knock it back a little. Okay. That sound you're hearing is just my palette knife cleaning up all the time on a paper towel below. So I'm just gonna pick this up a little more up in here. Letting things go over the edge a little where it needs to. The palette knife's doing the work. Okay. All right. Now I find this a little busy through here, frankly. I want to simplify that. So I'm just going to pull paint away. And you can see what happens when I do that. It kind of pulls things together. That's what it does. Not too many sharp edges there now. Our eye, it's a little softer. Our eye goes past this into this area behind. And now I can go back into that and maybe pull up a little detail again. Just in a couple of spots. And when you do that, if you've got soft edges and leading up to hard edges, that's very appealing. We look at that stuff. I'm just letting this thing evolve right now. Okay, this color here, which I wanted in the foreground, is a little strong. I'm just going to soften that down. And just for fun, I want to bring in a little more of the magenta here. Magenta and orange, kind of an interesting combination. That can look a little too sweet sometimes, but anyhow, there we go. Nothing wrong with making something look pretty, by the way. Nothing wrong at all. You know, subject matter is very personal. Some people really like things to be all fleshed out and worked out, and others want it rugged and rough and more abstract. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. That's your personal choice, really, in the end. So, how you want to make a painting look is your business. Okay. Now I'm starting to get a little too picky, in my opinion. I want to bring that strong shape down a little more. So to make that feel a little more like a tree that's coming down into this area, those areas of contrast, and back in there. There's a little texture. Kick that into the distance a bit. And already that's more interesting. If I've got that shape happening there in the dark, maybe I have that shape happening also in the light. So that's something to look for too. Different kinds of rhythms. If I've got this kind of thing happening there, then maybe I have a little bit of something that complements it over here in the light. Those are things that you can try. If you don't like it, you just get rid of it. All right. Okay, now I'm going to do one or two last things here. By the way, it doesn't take long to paint this particular way because you're you're really working with big shapes. And you can do very large paintings this way as well. So you don't have to limit yourself to a 12 by 12 like this. I'm doing this because I'm doing a video of this. And it's just easier for me to work my distances out for creating this video. I have the foam between myself and the painting, so I'm kind of trying to avoid it with my chin. You're probably hearing sound changes as well as I get closer or further away from it. So I don't have my lapel mic on today. All right. Okay. That's a little too dark right there. So I'm just going to take that down. Now I'm really squinting and trying to make sure my values are cohesive so that they're, there's a relationship with them. I could play with this for a long time, and it's not the program. I want to keep it simple and just get a sense of what's going on. All right. Now I'm going to take a brush again, and I want to soften just a couple of areas that trouble me. This color up here, I liked it when it first went in, but I think it's a little too strong, so I'm just going to knock that back. I think I just want to soften a few more edges in here, and I'm going to just knock that back a touch. That's a strong yellow. I want to break that up a little more. Keep the eye going to the crisp areas. Keep these areas here soft so we have a way of getting into this painting. And you can see how a painting like this evolves. There's no rules around this. The rules are what you make. I can start to bring more like darker, more intense colors into areas. Those violets up against those yellows. And just let this thing build its own story. Okay. Again, the danger is always like just getting too much going. Don't want to do that. I'm going to take one little brush here. Now this is a brush that I really like a lot. It looks like this. It's kind of a Dagger brush. Not an expensive one. This is one I got in India a little while back. And I want to bring just a little detail, not much, into a couple of places. I need a little more of the green that I have. I have a little bit of that left on my old palette, so I'm just going to pop that over here. And I'll put some liquid onto my brush, and a combination of the liquid and this color here. Again, without mixing it too crazy, I'm just going to put a couple of little details right over top of what you see here. And in some ways, these kinds of things you have to be careful because they can be out of context with everything else that you put down that's so loose. So there's a nice shape that comes out of my reference that comes away like so. I'm just going to make sure that it feels like these things all belong to each other somehow or other. If I put a color in like this, I should put a few other colors that are near that color so that it feels like they belong together. They're in the same family. And these are a little darker, a little crisper. You can let that color that's underneath come through. Nothing wrong with that. These trees are bumpy and lumpy. Again, I'm going to that magenta and the green. I want to bring just a little more detail into a couple of areas, but a little lighter in the background. Some of these trees that are in behind. I like when you're dragging a brush like this through color and it picks the color up underneath and pulls it into other zones. That's really nice. Okay, I'm probably really at this stage getting into stuff that I don't need to do, you know? So I think there's one thing I do feel I need. I need to strengthen the light as it comes into this area here. So I'm going to pick that strong color up that I have here and gray it just a touch and bring a little bit more of this light feeling coming through. And again, I'm trying to keep my brush strokes, my palette knife shapes different. So there's a sense of randomness to this, like nature gives us. And now I want to kill some of that over there. So to do that, I'm going to go into I'm actually going to grab some cobalt blue that I had left over. It's a cool blue. And I'm going to take that into the green, touch into the transparent oxide red. Now I've got quite a dark color, and I want to make this area darker through here. Those darks now, they really set off what's happening in the lights. I also want to knock this area down more. I'm going to bring in sometimes I'll just bring in some straight liquid and work that into the color. These are not important areas here. I want you to look past this into what's happening over here. Got a little bit of that darkness there. Maybe pick up a touch over here in that tree. Okay, I could carry on with this for a little while, but again, the danger of that is overworking things and, making it look I'm giving you too much information. So at this stage, I'm inventing color. It's not like this in the real image, that's for sure. But I'm not minding it. All right, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to do this and just say thanks for showing up. This is, roughly an hour long. It was really fun working on this. I enjoyed painting over my old painting, which was okay to start with, but nothing terribly exciting. This was fun just to try. Take a piece of paper, stick it over top of your painting and move it around and press it in again. Let the textures happen. I may work on this a little further. I'll post this so you know what the finish looks like. But this exercise is really about looking at the abstract, staying loose, putting color down, inventing color, make it your own, and hopefully there are a couple of things there that were helpful for you. If you like what you've seen, please give me a thumbs up. Please pass the link on to your friends. I do appreciate the support that I'm getting from those people who like what I'm doing. It makes me want to keep doing it. And again, I'm doing this with a little different format today with this device. I'm hoping that this works well and the sound's okay as well. So we'll find out. Everything's a big experiment, including every painting. So there it is. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Be well. And I'll see you next time. I should mention, if you want, you can go to my website. It's andrewjuddart.com, and you can see some of my other stuff there. I don't always update it as often as I should, but there are other images there, and you can see the prices of my work sometimes and things that have sold, and the lessons that I teach. I'm teaching private lessons and doing more and more of that recently. So please feel free to visit my website. And that's I guess all I have to say for this time. Take care, be well, stay safe. Bye now.